Welcome to Peculiar Tales, the show where we dive into the stranger things in history, urban legends, ghost stories, and anything else we find, well, peculiar. I'm Dawn.
And I'm Christy. When we look back on cases like this, they never seem unusual at the start, just people going about their lives. But somewhere along the way, whether by choice, by chance, or simply a wrong turn, everything shifts. This is the story of the Yuba County Five. On February 24th, 1978, 5 men left their homes in the Maryville and Yuba City area and traveled roughly 80 kilometers, about 50 miles north, to California State University to attend a basketball game. On their way home, they stopped at Bears Market in downtown Chico just before 10 p.m. After that, they vanished.
Before we follow them into the dark of the Plumas National Forest, we must first take a look at who they were. These weren't just 5 missing men. They were sons who never missed a curfew, friends who shared a deep bond, and individuals whose disappearances would leave 4 families grieving and one still searching for answers. The 5 men, Jack, or Jackie Hewitt, Ted Weir, Jack Doc Madruga, Bill Sterling, Gary Mathias, they all first met while attending the Gateway Project. It's a program that offered activities, training, and social opportunities for individuals with intellectual disabilities. They bonded through their basketball team, the Gateway Gators. To truly grasp the weight of this story, it's important to know who they were, not just as a group, but as 5 individual men.
Jackie Hewitt, was the youngest of the group at just 24 years old. Almost always smiling and radiating warmth. His mother called him a delight, and those who knew him agreed. Jackie found joy in simple pleasures, like being with his beloved dog Bo, riding his 90cc motorbike, and spending time with friends. He had mild learning disabilities, but that never defined him. Jackie was thoughtful, responsible, and fiercely loyal, especially to his closest friend, Ted. He took pride in being part of the Gateway Gators basketball team, where he felt a sense of accomplishment, camaraderie, and routine. Jackie's sister Dorothy recalled that he sometimes struggled with social cues, like not understanding why someone wouldn't wave back when he waved to them. But he approached life with honesty and an infectious joy that touched everyone around him.
Ted Weir was 32 and the group's emotional anchor. Outgoing and kind, he had a literal approach to rules and a devotion to routine that sometimes created endearing, even humorous moments. Students at Yuba Gardens remembered him as unfailingly polite and sweet. And he cared for Jackie like an older brother, always watching out for him. Ted had remarkable memory skills and he loved movies. And he once saved a man's life by recognizing an overdose and getting help. He found comfort and safety in structure, even in the small routines, like laying out his basketball uniform and shoes in anticipation of the next day's game, a quiet testament to the order that shaped his world.
Jack, or Doc Madruga, was 30 years old. He was quiet, reserved, and highly capable. He approached life methodically, often observing before acting, and had a strong sense of responsibility that those around him relied on. Doc had served in the U.S. Army and was stationed in Vietnam in 1968, then worked as a professional truck driver before returning home. He was proud of his independence and purchased a turquoise and white 1969 Mercury Montego with his military savings. This car was his pride and joy, and was the vehicle he drove the night the group disappeared. Doc also had a love for learning and personal growth. He completed college courses on his own and enjoyed mastering tasks that required focus and precision. Those who knew him admired his quiet strength, responsibility, and the way he balanced thoughtfulness with action in everything he did.
Bill Sterling was 29 years old. He was calm, methodical, and thoughtful, the quiet strength of the group. Skilled with his hands, he loved fixing cars, tinkering with gadgets, and helping friends and family with projects or repairs. Bill was dependable in a way that didn't call attention to itself, quietly making life easier for those around him. His family remembered him as steady and patient, someone who could always be relied upon in a crisis or simply lend a hand. Among the boys, his calm nature was a grounding force, balancing the group's energy and giving everyone a sense of stability and reassurance.
Gary Mathias was 25 and full of curiosity, energy, and a mischievous sense of humor that could lighten even tense moments. He loved teasing his friends and sharing a laugh, but beneath the playfulness was a young man who sometimes struggled with anxiety, especially in unfamiliar or unpredictable situations. Despite this, Gary was brave in his own way, always wanting to be part of the group's adventures, basketball games, and outings. His infamous laugh, boundless curiosity, someone who brought joy, energy, and a spark of light.
Together, these 5 men formed a bond that went beyond friendship, protective of each other, and deeply familiar with each other's routines and quirks. Yet, on that cold February night in 1978, even the strongest bonds couldn't protect them from what laid ahead.
Their drive home that night should have been a straight shot south on Highway 99 or Highway 70, a trip that normally took about an hour. But the next morning, when their families realized they hadn't returned, worry set in immediately. These men had routine, and it was unlikely that any of them would have deviated from them. On top of that, they had their Gateway Gators championship game the next day, something none of them would have risked missing. Families began calling one another, hoping perhaps the boys had stopped at someone else's home, but deep down, they knew that this was very unlikely.
When the families reached out to the Yuba County Sheriff's Office, they were told there wasn't much that could be done. All 5 men were over 18, and the sheriff explained that they would have to wait 24 to 48 hours before they could officially be reported as missing. Even after the families emphasized that each of the men had intellectual disabilities, they were told there was still nothing that could be done at the time. Determined not to wait, the families took matters into their own hands. They drove up and down the highways. They made calls to anyone they could think of, and they searched every likely spot. But there was still no sign of the 5 men. At 8 p.m. that night, the families reached back out to the sheriff's department and told them they needed help finding the boys.
The initial investigation began by retracing the men's steps. Authorities started at the basketball game they had attended the night before and spoke with an editor of a Chico newspaper who confirmed he had seen the men at the game. Between February 25th and the 27th, there was no information, no sightings, no sign of the men at all. Then, on February 28th, Forest Services contacted authorities with startling news. They had found a car deep in the Plumas National Forest, about 70 miles in the wrong direction, high up in the mountains. The description of the vehicle, a 1969 turquoise and white Mercury Montego, Jack Madruga's car.
The discovery shocked everyone. Why would the 5 men have driven 70 miles in the wrong direction? Deep into a national forest in the middle of winter. A place rugged with snowdrifts and cliff edges, where one misstep could send someone plummeting 1,000 feet. It simply didn't make sense. This was what some called no man's land. Why would they have gone there? The car itself offered few clues. There was no damage, the keys were missing, and the driver's side window was down. Inside were only milk cartons and candy wrappers. One investigator reached out to the milk distributor to track where the cartons had been sold. Starting at Chico State, they checked stores along the men's likely route, finally arriving at Bears Market in Chico. There, a woman who had worked the night of the disappearance recalled seeing the men just before the store closed around 10 p.m. That would be the last confirmed sighting of the 5 men.
Jack had made this trip many times before and knew the route well. To reach the Plumas National Forest, they would have had to cross a bridge, a clear indicator they were heading in the wrong direction. There were also signs marking the National Forest long before the service road began. Any of these should have prompted them to turn around. The road where the car was found wasn't a main highway. It was a remote service road, not clearly marked on maps. There was no logical reason for them to be there. Not a shortcut, not even a joyride would have taken them that far into such isolated territory. Something had gone terribly wrong.
A search of the immediate area around where the car was found began quickly. Multiple agencies responded, more than 200 people on foot, on horseback, and in snow-equipped vehicles. Helicopters circled overhead, and alongside them were the families joining the effort, combing through the rugged terrain in hopes of finding any sign of the men. Jackie Hewitt's father, Jack Sr., was among those searching. He knew the area well. His family had hunted there for years, and he swears he would find them. But the weather turned harsh. Snow fell heavily, drifts grew deeper, and conditions became increasingly treacherous. And because of this, the search was called off multiple times. March saw the most concentrated effort. By April and May, activity slowed dramatically, and by June, the search had largely come to a halt.
On June 4th, 1978, 3.5 months after the men had disappeared, a group of motorcyclists rode past a Forest Service campground where they noticed a terrible smell. One of the trailer's windows had been smashed. Inside, they discovered the emaciated remains of Ted Weir. He was laying on his back, his hands resting on his chest. His pant legs were rolled up above his knees, and his feet showed sign of severe frostbite. He had been wrapped tightly in several sheets. When Ted disappeared, he weighed around 220 pounds and was clean-shaven. When he was found, he weighed roughly 120 pounds and had grown a full beard. Based on the beard growth and his physical condition, the coroner determined that Ted had survived for somewhere between 8 and 13 weeks after the initial disappearance. The trailer where Ted was found was approximately 19 miles from the abandoned car.
The discovery devastated the families. Knowing that when they had been searching in the mountains in March, Ted may still have been alive, it was just too much to bear. It led many to wonder if more could have been done if the search had been more thorough. On June 6, 1978, about 7 miles south of the trailer, searchers found the decomposed remains of Jack Madruga, and just across the road lay the remains of Bill Sterling. Shortly after, they located Jackie Hewitt. The official cause of death for the men was listed as exposure. However, the condition of the remains made it impossible to determine whether injury or another factor had also contributed.
By this time, 4 of the 5 men had been found, but Gary Mathias was still missing. On June 19th, the official search was called off. The families, however, were not ready to stop. They remained in the mountains for 2 more weeks, continuing to search themselves. For many of them, this only reinforced the painful belief that they had done more to look for their loved ones than law enforcement had. There were reports that the U.S. Forest Services had informed authorities about the trailers earlier. It has also been said that Jack Sr. himself mentioned the trailers during the initial search. It was told to him that the men would never have made it that far in such harsh conditions. To the family, these claims raised difficult questions and deepened the feeling that more could have been done.
The men's abilities, or how they were perceived, seemed to cast a shadow over the case. Some newspapers described them in ways that were inaccurate and insensitive. One headline, for example, used a now outdated and offensive term to describe them. For the purposes of this story, we've reworded it to be respectful, but the message was clear. 5 men with intellectual disabilities remain missing. The families couldn't help but wonder, would the case have been treated differently if the papers had said 5 championship basketball players remain missing, or simply 5 men remain missing? To the families, the perception that their loved ones weren't capable was absurd, and it seemed to spill over into how the public and even some officials approached the investigation.
So what happened to the only person whose remains were not found? Well, by asking this question, it leads us into the theories of what happened that night. With evidence pointing to it being likely that Gary Mathias made it to the trailer, and with no body found, suspicion fell on Gary quickly. The question started to rise. Was he a victim, a scapegoat, or a suspect? Okay, so this story kind of makes me angry because I feel like because the boys, as they were more affectionately known, but these young men had learning disabilities, they weren't treated like anybody else during this investigation, in my opinion. And I really feel that the papers and the way they portrayed this did a huge injustice to these young men.
I agree.
Let's talk theories here. So Gary became a suspect very quickly. Not so much that the police were looking into him as being a suspect, but that's kind of the word that started to circulate real quick, was maybe he was involved. Because Gary was schizophrenic, so people were concerned that if he had been off his meds, would he have done something?
But was Gary the driver of the car?
No, that was Doc.
So, my head goes to a lot of these men in this group were all about doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were kind, they were compassionate, they helped, they knew their routines. To even change direction, okay, for this one night and not tell anybody.
Yeah.
That makes me think that maybe they felt they were helping somebody for some reason going into this wrong direction. Like if somebody had ill intent towards these men, they could have either known about how nice this group of men were.
Mm-hmm.
So if it was an ill-intended, follow us here, we need your help, right?
Right.
I could see those men being like, okay, we'll go help you.
Yeah.
Which, to me, again, in my mind, would explain why the driver's side window is down.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you put the window down to like somebody's on the other side. You're going to talk to them.
Right.
Now, because of the snow and when they found him, there was no evidence of another car being there.
No.
But if it was Gary Mathias and it wasn't ill intent, then you got to think, why didn't he just take the car and get out of there?
Or how did he convince them to go there? He would have had to convince Doc, like, hey, let's drive 70 miles in the wrong direction, up into the mountains. For funsies? Like
the whole thing is really confusing.
But this is the thing, though. So people kept wanting to weigh heavy on the fact that he was schizophrenic and maybe off of his meds. Now, his family had stated there is no way that if he was off his meds, they wouldn't have known, they wouldn't have noticed, and they would have let him go that night.
So if you're schizophrenic enough, like off your medicines,
Hmm.
I don't know much about schizophrenia. However, how would he have gotten through the basketball game?
Well, this is exactly it, right? He got all the way to the game, the entire game, being at Bears Market, and not one person said, yeah, the one guy was being aggressive. He was being strange. Nobody said there was any issues at all. The boys seemed to be having a fine time.
And those boys didn't ask for a map, did they?
Nope.
Like there was no reports of that.
No.
So they don't seem to be very lost.
No, they had done this trail many times, and it is literally a straight shot.
No,
Once
I
you are on
mean,
the highways,
I'm talking about on their way to this national forest.
no. But the road they were on wasn't on any maps. It's a service road. It's not even for general people to drive down.
Okay, so you have Madruga, who this car, he's never going to let somebody else drive it.
No.
He's done all his deeds in life to earn this car.
Hmm. It was his
And
pride and joy.
that's it, right? You have Matthias, who they're saying, no, he was, mentally unwell and it's his fault. But then you also have Hewitt, whose family knows the area because they hunt it. Because wasn't it Mr. Hewitt that was found in the trailer?
No, that was Ted Weir. Ted was the one that was found in the trailer. And this is where it all gets very hard to follow or hard to pinpoint down. Because some people had said going into this that there was a guy in the town who was known as like a bully. And apparently he had had problems with Gary. So some of the theories was that Gary never made it to where they made it. That for some reason they convinced the boys to go in the wrong direction and that Gary never made it past the bridge. They think an altercation happened and Gary never made it past the bridge because at one point the path leaving the car only had 4 sets of footprints, not 5. So that's where some of the families started to think that Gary never even made it off the bridge.
So if you have some people saying he made it as far as the bridge,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have other people saying, oh no, he took care of all of them. So what did Gary Mathias do? Because you have Mr. Ted Weir, is it?
Mm-hmm.
That was in the trailer.
Mm-hmm.
He had lived for approximately 8 to 13 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So in that vicinity, in 8 to 13 weeks, there's really no big signs of like footy prints. There's no like signs of activity of somebody living in the area. But there's nothing being said about that to say how long Ted was actually there. Did he just get there and passed away? Or was he in fact there for many weeks?
This is the breakdown of kind of what they think. So, law enforcement believes that the 3 men, so meaning Jackie, Doc, and Bill, never made it to the trailer, that they passed along the way. They think that Gary and Ted made it to the trailer, was the one that wrapped Ted up because there was no way he did it himself. So somebody wrapped him up.
Oh, okay. So did Gary Mathias then fly?
Well, this
Where's
is the
his
thing.
footy print?
When they were in the trailer, there were cans of food that were found empty. So they were surviving off what little food they found in there. Now, they went missing in February. It wasn't until June that they were found. So there's no footprints in the snow because there's no snow left.
No, I mean like because even leaving the car, like when they found the car, they said there's only footprints of 4.
That's what the family had said, that there was
So,
only 4 footprints, 4 sets of footprints, I should say.
okay, so and if we go back and discuss the bully theory.
Well, that was just a theory that some of the family members had had. But the other thing is, too, Ted Weir's shoes were missing. They weren't on his feet. But Gary Mathias's shoes were found in the trailer. So this is why law enforcement thinks that Gary definitely made it to the trailer with Ted. and that he probably at some point realized either after Ted passed or before he passed that I need to go get help, I need to do something, and left the trailer. Now, whether he got lost further into the woods, whether he fell somewhere and just they've never recovered the body, that's undetermined. But there also have been many sightings of Gary since the disappearance. There have been people who said, I saw him here, I saw him there. Somebody said they saw him as a hitchhiker. One of the families thought they saw him at a bar. So there's been sightings. Now we all know how sightings work. It doesn't mean that he's there. But some family members were convinced that he made it out. But none of it makes sense. Like none of it fully checks out. Now there was a surplus of food and a generator on site in a separate area. But it was said by the families that none of the guys really would have known, like that made it anyways, would have known how to operate the generator. And Ted Weir's family said that didn't believe that he would have even gone rummaging through other people's stuff because if it wasn't his, he wasn't going to touch it. If it belonged to somebody else, no matter what, that was kind of his mindset, right? So another point of view of why they think possibly someone else was with him at least the trailer.
I find it so odd that this is a service trailer.
Mm-hmm.
So in this service trailer, in this national forest, is a generator. It's got food. This is clearly a place for the rangers. Is that what they're called?
Forestry workers. So
Forestry
the people like
workers.
cutting down the trees and doing that stuff.
Okay, so let's say, guessing only here,
Mm-hmm.
that you're done with cleanup and everything by the end of October.
Mm-hmm.
You're ready. You've winterized all your things.
Mm-hmm.
You're done.
Yep.
And you don't go back before June? That's odd.
You close it up and you go for the winter. Not until closer to like when the weather started to shift. Come like spring, that's when you would go. Because the service people found the car back in February. And for whatever reason, nobody believed that these men could make it 19 miles on foot to where the trailers were located. Now, that to me is wild. If you are dealing in the most extreme conditions, you don't know what somebody's capable of until they're put in that situation.
But then why go deeper? Okay, so if I was stuck somewhere, okay, so now we've driven somewhere and maybe the car's not working anymore. Maybe somebody's there that we think we're helping and they're knocking on the window and we're like, hey, okay, so where do we go from here? Where do you need the help, right?
Right.
And you find out in a quick hurry, like, this is not what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
You're going back the same way you came.
The way it plays out almost makes it seem like one of two things. Either they went up there, got out of the car, and collectively decided that we are going to leave this car and just start walking.
With the window down.
Or someone was there that made them
Yeah.
start walking and saying, you're going to go. But this is the thing. So somebody would have had to convince them to go down that road. Because they shouldn't have been on that road to begin with, to even get to the national park. Somebody would have had to convince them to go down that road and then tell them to get out of the car. But what is the purpose behind that? Why do you tell these boys to get out and start walking and you don't take the car? You don't take any of their personal belongings? Nothing? You just tell them to start walking and then leave? Why?
It's just
What
so...
is the purpose to that?
No, I'm trying to wrap my head around it because it's like, okay, so let's look at it like we would a movie.
Right.
Okay, so you got 5 men in a car over an hour in the wrong direction. But where they stopped off last, they weren't in distress. They weren't looking for maps. They weren't scared. No. And they weren't in a rush to help anybody there.
No.
And the window of the driver's side is down, which, again, I've said it many times.
I agree with you.
somebody was on the other side of the window. So what if one of them got out of the car?
Mm-hmm.
Any one of them.
Right.
And they're like, I'm going to go out and look around, see what's going on, right?
Right.
Let's just see. And then they're on his side. So he rolls down the window,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they're like, maybe something's off.
Right.
And they're like, we got to go. Like, probably down here. It would have been quick for him not to lock up the car, put the window up. And that's just if it's just them.
Right.
Now, if people saw 4 footprints in the snow,
Mm-hmm.
there was no other car tracks?
Nobody said there was nothing reported of any other car tracks. So, and again, the weather is bad and whatnot. So maybe between snowing and blowing and everything else, this whole story does not make sense because every theory raises more questions. Every question makes you question 4 more things. Like this whole thing doesn't make any sense.
Ugh, it's a mess.
It is a mess.
And
You're
those poor
absolutely
people
right.
that are missing all their men,
Mm-hmm.
the mothers, the brothers, the sisters, the friends at the
Mm-hmm.
program. You've got other basketball team members.
And
Like,
that's the thing too, like to take into consideration, right? Is these boys would not have missed their basketball game the next day on purpose. There's no way that any one of them would have been like, who cares if we miss the game tomorrow? Who cares if we're late showing up? Not a one of them would have done this. So why take a trip down a wrong road far into the wilderness?
because nobody would have been prepared for that. As if you're going to
No.
go in the middle of winter into a national forest that's as rugged as it's described as,
Mm-hmm.
you would have warmer clothes.
Yep.
You would have matches or a lighter for fire.
Boots.
You would have a tent, or you would have blankets or something,
Right.
food,
Right?
not just candy and milk.
Yeah.
So you have to wonder, like, I think for me personally, I feel like there was somebody that could have convinced them that they could help with something as a group of men to go all the way out of their way. That's the only thing I could
Well,
think
that's
of.
the only thing that kind of makes sense to me either. That maybe before they left Bears Market, without that cashier noticing, she saw them there, she saw them leave. Doesn't mean she was paying close attention to them once they left. What if someone in the parking lot had said to these men, I really need help. I'm staying up on this service road in a trailer. I just need to get up there, blah, blah, blah. And then got them out there. But this is the part where it adds more questions. Why make them get out and start walking? You didn't hurt any of them. You didn't take anything they had. You didn't take the vehicle. Why make them get out and just start walking?
It's strange.
It is. It's very strange.
I feel like something terrible happened. That's for sure.
That's exactly it. But no matter which theory you turn to, none of them truly account for what happened that night. Not the distance, not the terrain, not the choices that led 5 men who valued routine, familiarity, and safety so far off course. Even now, how they ended up there at all feels almost impossible to explain. Road signs were passed, bridges were crossed, mile after mile carried them deeper into a place they never should have been. What remains is a story filled with gaps, spaces where answers should be, but aren't. 4 men were found, separated by miles, each ending raising more questions than it answered. And one, Gary Mathias, vanished entirely, leaving behind only theories and echoes. Was he lost while trying to help? Did he never make it that far? Or did something else happen in the dark that we'll never fully understand? The Yuba County Five didn't disappear into legend. They disappeared into confusion, into snow, silence, and a landscape that offers no explanation. And what may be the most unsettling part of all? Not knowing what went wrong, only knowing that somewhere in the cold and in the quiet, something did. And as always, thank you for joining us on Peculiar Tales. If you enjoyed this episode, we would love to hear from you. Leave a comment and a review or a rating wherever you listen. It truly helps these stories find their way to new listeners. Be sure to follow us so you never miss an episode. And until the Peculiar calls again for another tale, bye for now.